Overall, our figures are very bad. We've got the highest death rate of any country in the world, I think, or close to it. We certainly did for a long time. But I mean, there are so many factors there. Our healthcare outside the better off end of Lima is pretty atrocious. There were, I think, when we started, 200 ITU beds in the whole country.
Wow.
So obviously they were overloaded very quickly. The government spent a lot and put in a lot, and we're well into the thousands now.
In March, we were all just blissfully sitting by saying, this is happening in Europe, it's not going to reach us. And, we're very, very far away. Nothing much is going to happen and it'll come and go. And to my mind, even when they said lockdown, I assumed, okay, it'll be there for 4 weeks, 8 weeks at best, and then we should be back doing the same thing. And then we realized as we went into it that that was not the case. It's getting worse. And,
We have a large number of our families that work for Dorset County Hospital, and that represents obviously a range of different roles in the hospital, from surgeons and doctors to consultants to nurses to porters to cleaners. There's a huge, we're the school that's closest to the hospital, and we kind of were very aware of the threat of COVID probably quite early on, because we heard the murmurings amongst our parents about how the NHS was gearing up for what they saw as an inevitable wave that would come towards the middle of March onwards.
We went into COVID back in March in a pretty good position, actually, because so much of the work we had done for our first 12, 13 months of existence was about building the right online learning management system way of operating to capture a lot of what we're doing. So we sort of do fairly fast and rapid prototyping, as you're probably aware, and we move pretty quickly.
So it's King's Cross Academy. We're based in central London. We're a brand new school in the heart of King's Cross, which is a real transport hub. Lots of people pass through here, and we're very lucky and fortunate to be surrounded by incredible organisations and companies that allow us to be innovative with our learning and support our learning, give our learning a purpose, do so much in enriching our curriculum. And for us, the start of the pandemic really hit home when one of those companies we work with, which is Nike, has one of their stores in King's Cross, and we're very grateful to them because they provide us with coaches who come in and take lunch clubs and introduce the children to a whole range of different sports that they might not necessarily have experienced in a school. And one of their coaches basically tested positive.
What we realized is that within the context of that the families were faced with, which of course is dramatically different from the context that they're normally faced with, that what we were providing was as valuable and important as it would have been had they been at school in a different context.
The first few weeks, there began to be a sense of despondency. There was a fear as people were being laid off. Parents were losing jobs. GEMS gave a lot of COVID relief, or almost 1,500 parents of mine were given concessions so that they could continue their education of their children.
And we had a family about 3 or 4 weeks before the country went into lockdown that had returned from a foreign holiday from an area which had been put under the quarantine list. So they experienced that they were the first family for us that experienced being in isolation. And we were really clear that as soon as a family had come back from being away, that we had a duty to those children to ensure that they could continue to access learning in the most engaging and inspiring way possible. So at that point, we started trialing our virtual school program. And we learned a lot in that first week of what worked and what didn't work. We tried live lessons, and the first attempt was every child's going to join in with every lesson, and we'll try and make it as similar to being in class as possible. And it quickly, through consultation with the children, and most importantly, not the adults, but the children, it was really clear that wasn't the right approach for them, and I've always said, and I'm a big advocate of using technology in schools, but I've always said my worst nightmare is seeing a child sat in front of a screen all day.
We did a really quick parent survey and said, look, how you're traveling, what do you need, what's going to be important in terms of how we operate with you in this environment. And for us, the very clear feedback from families was, we are really struggling. We need fun, flexibility, and freedom. So they're the three words that we went with. And we launched into what we called Learning Goes Audacious. So we thought, let's take the bull by the horns here.
And it felt like it came to our door a lot quicker than we expected. You hear it on the news and suddenly it is here. And that kind of shocked us into starting to think about, right, what's going to happen here? What is the worst case scenario? And obviously lockdown came into the conversation, and we're lucky to have Pip, who's our STEM leader, incredible with technology, and having time to discuss with him. He was class-based at the time, so having to look after his own class as well, having to organise for him to come out of class and working together, and thinking, right, what does this mean? We'd never been in this position before. We'd always talked about flipping the classroom and use of technology to extend the learning beyond the boundaries of the school walls. But as everything in school, everything gets overtaken because it's so much to do and you don't have time to concentrate on these things. So we also looked at it as an opportunity. Hey, this is going to happen. Like, let's jump 5 years ahead in our development plan and bring all that right now, because we're going to have to.
Well, we've noticed a couple of interesting trends. And again, from what I gather, this is mirrored around the world. Whilst the better are doing better, the worse are doing worse, and the spread of achievement is broad. So we're now looking at what do we need to do to be able to counteract that trend and help those weaker ones and spend more time with those weaker ones. And we'll for the next academic year, we'll come up with solutions for that.
A large number of students have left the city since then, us being a large expatriate population. By the time people began to lose their jobs and they began to realize that this is not going to end anytime soon, either because they couldn't stay or because they felt their own countries would be safer in terms of actually being with their families, they decided to leave the country.
That we did physical resource delivery packs every single week. So each week we would go and visit the child and see them, obviously from a social distance, but way through the window or at the end of the driveway or the gate or whatever. And those things ranged. So we delivered chalks to them, a big pack of chalks, and we encouraged them to do street art, and we celebrated that. We gave them watercolor paints, and we linked that with a lesson from one of our teachers on how to use watercolors. We gave them a zip wire pack. That was one of the most popular ones, so they can make a teddy bear zip wire from the top window, and they filmed it, and we put that into a video and shared that. So each week there was something that went home. Now, in the majority of cases, that we would get response from that. They would send it in, and parents would be really positive about that. So I think that it was something like 18 weeks we did that for, where everything went home each week. So
virtual tour that we put together was the starting point for us with COVID, because we were about to launch into what has become a really key part of who we are as a village, and that is welcoming the world in and sharing and collaborating with other educators, and also inducting new families and introducing them to and giving them information, because I think one of the things we've found is really important for us in the way that we are operating is to give as much information as possible.
quite a clear direction for you, like the communication with our staff, and like Amir, thankfully, like you're very forward thinking and you knew what the children sort of wanted and you knew what you wanted to deliver for them during that time. So I think that was when for us it started like becoming more of a reality. I think a lot of schools at that point saw it as something to be like fearful of, and a lot of schools like put websites together, put PDFs and things out there, and started just building as many resources as possible. But we went for like a more sort of personalized approach, and I think that's when we decided that, yeah, we're going to see if we can actually do this, if this is something that we can come through and yeah, come back into school and pursue like blended learning and flipped learning. And if we try to make it as personalized for the children as possible, which I think was a great thing that we decided to do. And obviously it was with so little like guidance out there. You're trying to do something, but you're doing it at the same, like the government's telling you to do something and you're trying to do it too, but there's no, you're heading into the unknown. And I think there was so much discovery and so much adapting that had to happen at that stage, that we just had to, we're very lucky that we have the staff that we do who can take on training like that and adapt for the situation. But like, that was huge. Yeah, it was a very
typically our children would spend a week in the Amazon jungle, or they'd spend a week in the mountains, or they'd spend a week in the Sacred Valley, or they'd do all these kinds of things and have some quite challenging and exciting areas. The older children would be the leaders for the younger children, so there's a lot of mixed age interaction happening in those areas.
More at an emergent curriculum that evolves from around what's happening around the child. And I've also put my brakes on, just pumping them with content. So this last week of December, like, I've said it's going to be devoted to reading, because I think reading, not just reading silently, but being read to, making it a multi-age kind of occasion where grandparents are reading, parents are reading, teachers are reading, leaders are reading, makes the children come into contact with what is loved by a whole lot of people.
One of my disappointments is that the local area schools didn't speak loudly enough together at the time and go, no, we're not, this is guidance, or challenge it legally to say we want to come back. And we did challenge it in the end. So we brought our reception year ones back, and that all went well. They were in groups of 15, but we then challenged quite publicly. We wrote letters to the Secretary of State, we wrote letters to councillors and MPs, and got on the phone. And it was about a 3 or 4 days where I didn't get off the phone to various people, and it was kind of, the officer saying, oh, this MP's on the phone now, this representative's in the Department for Education on the phone now. And I really dug my heels in on it and said, we have the capacity to bring back the children. And it got to a point where the governors held an extraordinary meeting and voted to basically go against the local authority and act.
Our local New South Wales governing body basically said all bets are off for 2020 in terms of meeting outcomes and requirements. They allowed a whole lot more flexibility to occur. So we went, right, this is our window. This is our little tip of the iceberg. So we're going to dive in as far as we can with it. So we jumped straight down the end of 2 of our key horizon goals in our educational model, which was transdisciplinary learning and no timetable. We
were great. We met 85% on average where we're accessing the remote learning, which is incredibly high, we think. And then, when it started to drop off, we were then able to innovate and change what we were doing. We kind of just felt that halfway through, we were like, one of the great things about the Academy is our project-based curriculum, and were we now not working so much in these projects, and was that impacting the children? So we changed back to doing whole school projects and collaborating and innovating with everyone. And
we started to expand more and add on an extracurricular activities program, and then add on some kinds of replacements for these outdoor experiences, which meant things like campouts and sleepovers for the younger children. And that's been fascinating. All of these, of course, have happened in the living room or in the bedroom, but we've been able, again, to mix the older kids and the younger kids and introduce the slightly offbeat alternatives to the things that we would normally do.
And it's really made me think that I don't need time. The more I think about it, and I'm actually attempting something from January, I'm going to remove the bells in the school. I'm going to take away a daily timetable. I'm going to try and see if I can make a lesson plan for a week, and then see whether that makes any difference at all. Because I think when an experience has to be completed, it often doesn't happen because the bell rings and the teacher says, now close your books and we're going to do math now.
We moved almost overnight from having 5 classrooms to 10 classrooms in our school. So we did that by converting other spaces. So we converted our library, we moved all the bookshelves out into the corridor, and we turned the library into a second reception classroom. We turned our hall into a classroom. We turned a upstairs storeroom, which is a big storeroom to be fair, big enough to be a classroom, into a classroom, and we installed a marquee with the help of grapnels onto the front of the school. We could have put it around the back, but I was very deliberate and stuck it around the front so everyone can see it, because I thought, if I want to show that we can do this and that other schools can do this.
One of the quests was, designing and then cooking a meal for your family. And making it a real family occasion where parents could be involved in the learning as well and feel empowered in that, because I think a lot of the things for parents was about, we don't know how to help our child here, and we're really, really thrown in the deep end, working from home. Kids are sort of going crazy. We had one sort of younger cohort of parents say, can we just do it 4 days a week and have the 5th day just as a family day? And we went, absolutely. So we just let that freedom and flexibility be the thing that really dominated the offerings that we put forward.
Well, I can only really talk about primary level, but so much of what teachers do is they know their children so well that they're teaching, and they know exactly how to personalize it to those specific children and how to support them by whatever means that might be. And I think if we were going down an approach of providing something that like BBC Bite Size, which is a great resource, we just wouldn't be able to personalize it for our children. So very early days, we spoke about the whole idea of making like hyperdocs that can go out, and then teachers can personalize that learning. And also it's the same as what's happening in school, so it's not doubling workload, but the fact that when the children come back in, they need to be able to have covered the same content as the children who have been in school, because otherwise, especially in September, that time where, the children are going to be like catching up, essentially was the term. And that would be so hard for them if they were continuing to miss out on what was happening in school. So we just wanted to make it as cohesive, I think, as possible, and as in line as what's like happening every single day.
Somebody came up with the idea of whitewater rafting in your living room. So we've done whitewater rafting in the living room. Everybody sits on a chair. They're taught how to make a paddle out of a broomstick and a toilet roll, and they're told what to wear if they're whitewater rafting. So they've all got a helmet on. They've got. I did it on one of the first ones as well. I sat there and did it as well, and then what you get is a video of the run down the whitewater stream at Lunawana, which is not far south of Lima. And you get one of our assistant principals shouting at them about, row to the right and row backwards on the left, and, gives them all the instructions, and everybody's going like this.
I look at it as, when you have a problem, you have to sometimes work through the problem. Sometimes there's no alternative of even going around the problem or skirting the problem. This pandemic is one where we have to all go through with it. And in going through that problem, it changes you, it changes your perception. And maybe some of the things I didn't do before, or I would continue using Zoom. I would continue using this virtual platform. I will continue connecting with schools worldwide. We've already twinned with something like 15 schools in 9 countries. I wouldn't have done it if I were busy with my teaching and learning in the days of old. So
we ran a summer school program where we opened up every week and ran some intervention. That was mainly social and emotionally focused rather than academic. There was a little bit of literacy intervention tied up in it, but the main purpose was that community and that cohesion and that all that support they'd had since March, because we didn't shut obviously for half terms or Easter or bank holidays. We were in every single day. All of that, we didn't want that to stop in the end of July. We had to carry on in some respects. So we opened up at various points during summer holidays and offered a regular program there for our families.
I put it on the parent Facebook page today. So I sort of went in and got my ticket to the LLV Rome Museum, and then talked to these guys. If we can.
Basically, we've just been testing the water level, the height, seeing how much it needs to go down and the gravity and everything. And Hugo's actually gone out and bought us some pipes for the aqueduct. Okay. Yeah. So, Jeannie? Go to James. Do you want to turn it on? Oh, is it going? Yeah. Okay, so I can follow the pathway. Are you putting soap in there? Yeah, I can see it faster. It kind of stops there. Guys, can you get a whole bunch of paper towels for me, please?
We didn't start with live lessons. You know, we were nervous about it. You know, the unions came out quite strongly about not using live lessons because of the safeguarding issues, which scared everyone to death. And rather than looking at subjectively thinking, actually, we could work it. We all kind of made a blanket decision of not to do it, but some schools were kind of breaking ranks and doing it. And then we discovered, actually, we can do it, and we can do it safely, and it does work. And I think getting over that comfort barrier of teachers doing it, and I think one of the best things coming out of live lessons was, and the remote learning as well, was that parents suddenly realized how much we do.